Welcome to this episode of Wine Terroir. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the wines of Alsace and what makes them really interesting and terroir-driven wines that more people should be exploring. Alsace is a region in the eastern part of France. And in fact, this region has actually traded control from French and German control over the 100 years of history through the various wars, and has been influenced by both the German and French culture. On the eastern side, you have the Rhine River, which is the physical, geographical border with Germany and France. And on the western side, you have the Vosges Mountains. These two features are really important to defining a lot of the terroir and influences of the wine region. The Vosges Mountains on the west create a rain shadow, which actually prevents the rains from coming in the fall and make Alsace one of the driest wine regions in all of France. That doesn't mean that the rain doesn't come, because it does get quite rainy in the winter, but at that point the grapes have already been harvested and therefore is less of an issue. Because every time we have rain, you basically have disease and frost and mildew pressures. The vineyards go from a very high elevation in the mountains all the way down to the river, and the soils change dramatically. In fact, the soils of Alsace are one of the most diverse in all of France as well. It's a kaleidoscope of different types of soil, from volcanic to granite to schist and limestone, and then when you get further down by the river, you get clay and marl. Various soils are good for growing different types of grapes. Most of the grapes are planted in line with the slope of the mountain and then have to be harvested by hand, which makes it a more time-consuming and less mechanical process. Some of the steeper vineyards are actually terraced in order to make harvesting the grapes a lot easier. If you want to look at Alsace as a region in general, you want to look at you can break it up into two big areas, the Upper Rhine and the Lower Rhine. And so the Upper Rhine, or the Haut Rhine, is in the south, where more of the quality producers are located, and the Bas Rhine, the Lower Rhine, which is in the north. Let's talk about grape varieties. There are a bunch of grape varieties grown, but there are 4 noble varieties, and this is important. The 4 noble varieties are Riesling, Pinot Gris, Gewurztraminer, and Muscat. Now, Muscat has largely fallen out of favor, and it probably makes up about 2% of all the plantings. The other grapes, Riesling, Gewurztraminer, and Pinot Gris, are the 3 most planted grapes, with Riesling being the largest. So let's talk about the classification of Alsatian wines. There's 5 main ways that wines are classified. There's the general Vin d'Alsace, or regional Alsatian wine. And then there's this AOC communal, there's 11 communes around various parts of Alsace that can be labeled like a wine of one of these 11 communes. You don't see those as much imported into the US. And then in addition to that, you'll see a wine that is labeled, but it's coming from a specific vineyard site. And in Alsace, they call these specific vineyard sites Ludits. Then there's Alsace Grand Cru. Alsace Grand Cru was created in 1975, and slowly they started with 1 and then added in the 20s, and then eventually got to 50, then finally, I think in 2007, added their 51st. Now, these were all considered one appellation until 2011, when they decided to break up all 51 of these Grand Cru sites into individual appellations. And this allowed them to have stricter quality control and individual appellation rules, as opposed to just having a generic set of rules. It's probably a reaction to some of the larger producers that are essentially using Grand Cru sites, but decided not to label them as Grand Cru and just gave them their own personal luxury brand, like Trimbach's Clos Saint-Hune, which has nothing labeled around a single vineyard, and Clos Saint-Hune isn't actually a vineyard itself, to my knowledge. They're using their own blend of wines from their own top sites, which happen to be Grand Cru sites. They just don't label it as such. And the 5th and final appellation is Crémant d'Alsace, which is a regional appellation. Okay, so today we're going to taste 2 wines from Alsace, and these wines were provided by the Drink Alsace org. So when you drink these, #DrinkAlsace. I want to thank them for providing these wines free of charge with no strings attached for the reviews. The first one is the 2016 Meyer von Pinot Blanc Via Vin. Again, Via Vin standing for old vines. I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a second. This wine is labeled Pinot Blanc, but unlike other areas when they actually mean the grape Pinot Blanc, in Alsace, anytime it's labeled Pinot Blanc, it doesn't actually mean it's the grape variety Pinot Blanc. It means all of the Pinot varieties that can be vinified white. So this includes Pinot Blanc, Auxerrois, which is also often called Pinot Auxerrois, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir even. And I think sometimes they might actually blend in a little bit of Chardonnay, but this specific bottling is actually the majority Auxerrois. I find it very troublesome that they can't just label what it actually is and that they actually have to call it Pinot Blanc when it's actually, there's a grape variety called Pinot Blanc. This wine is imported by Kermit Lynch, who is one of the great importers of our time. And this one is a Vin d'Alsace, so a generic regional appellation. And they are from Katzenthal, which is in the Haut-Rhine, so the Upper Rhine, which is in the south. This wine is basically grown on granitic soils that have some mica, marl, and limestone in them, but typically known for their granite soils. It is 65% Pinot Auxerrois, 20% Pinot Blanc, and 15% Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir. Again, the Pinot Noir is vinified white. Let's give it a taste. Okay, this wine is a pale lemon color. Call it medium minus intensity on the nose. Definitely very apple-y aromas, like a red apple, apple skin, maybe a little white peach, and a touch of pear. Not the craziest aromatic nose. Simple but very clean. Let's taste on the palate. Again, I'd say medium intensity on the palate. Wine is dry, medium acidity, medium minus alcohol. And I would say the body is medium. There's a little bit of weight to this wine, which I quite like. You like apple pie-ish, kind of like, stronger flavors. Pear, and then I'm getting a little bit more citrus. I missed that citrus on the nose. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit of like a lemon zest on the palate as well. Finish, medium length finish, a solid finish. This is there's a good texture to the wine. It's really enjoyable. It's better than a ton of Pinot Gris out there, and I think that this is 87 points in my book. The finish is there. I actually think the finish is probably the highlight of the wine, as well as the texture. Acidity is refreshing. The flavor profile is simple, not super complicated, but it's definitely representative of the region. I will say that it's very complicated if you actually do want to taste an Alsatian Pinot Blanc that actually is made from Pinot Blanc. You need to look online and look for the tech sheets, because most bottlings won't actually tell you on the back label. A few producers do, but for the most part they don't. Domaine Weinbach Grand Cru Riesling from 2016, Riesling from Schlossberg. So Schlossberg is one of the original prototypes of the Alsace Grand Cru system, and I believe it's the first one that was made a Grand Cru in 1975. And Domaine Weinbach, they've been growing grapes since 800 AD. Now, the actual domain itself has been established in 1612 and has been owned by the same family since 1898. It's really interesting. There's a lot of family-owned winemakers and winemaking in Alsace that you don't see in a ton of other regions, and they have so much history because the winemaking is just always a part of the culture that it's really impressive to see, and really something that I hope other countries actually can start to replicate, because it's a wonderful thing to experience. This is also known for granitic soils, so it's mainly grown on granite. Now, although these bottles, Alsace wine is bottled in the flute bottle, and there are a lot of the same varieties that are grown in Germany. The wines are typically fermented to a higher level of alcohol than their counterparts, and usually have a lot more body and are drier. Although Alsace is 90% white wine, with 10% for Pinot Noir, the majority of the wines are dry or off-dry. So when it's a Grand Cru site, actually each individual site has different requirements in terms of what varieties, based on what's the soil, based on the aspect. And with all things French, there's always exceptions. There's several sites that can be blends, and several sites that can grow a variety that is not one of the noble varieties. But for the most part, it's usually noble varieties in Grand Cru sites. And they also have lower yield limits in terms of how many grapes can grow per hectare, but also they have minimum must weight requirements and things like that, so that basically resulting in higher quality wines. So this color, I'll give this a medium lemon. It's all medium minus, let's call it medium minus lemon. There's a lot more going on in the nose here. I'm gonna go pronounced on the nose. A lot of people say petrol. I like to think of gas on the nose in terms of like you just pumped gas into your car and then you smell your hand. Still getting an apple, kind of more of like a, not cidery is the wrong term, like, but bruised apple is probably is the term I'm looking for. There's definitely some florals too, a little nectarine, definitely peach, more riper peach. Definitely some florals too, some white flowers and acacia. Orange blossom kind of thing going on. I'm probably drinking this way too young. The suggested retail price of this wine is $40. Okay, this wine is still pronounced on the palate. It's actually slightly different than the nose. It's really interesting. On the palate, still pronounced. The wine is dry. There's probably a couple grams of residual sugar in there, but still dry. High acidity, really lively and vibrant acidity. The alcohol, I'd say medium, doesn't bother me. What is this? 12 and a half? 13 and a half. Wow, okay. Holding its alcohol very well. More weight to this wine. This is definitely medium plus for me. Even though it doesn't have the sugar, it's still hefty. On the palate though is much more interesting. So obviously still getting the apple, a little bit of bruised apple skin, but then I'm getting a lot more citrus like nectarine, like a little bit of canned peach. Yeah, orange zest, much more citrusy on the palate than I was getting in the nose, but like the big citrus, really, and a good finish as well. Medium plus length finish. This is drinking really, really well. This can age probably 10, 15 years easily. And I think that this is a fabulous wine. I'd call this 92 points. I think this is probably, as a baby, I shouldn't be drinking it right now, but for those of you who want to drink it, go for it. Okay, well that wraps up this episode. In the next episode, I am going to cover the other two main noble varietals, Pinot Gris and Gewurztraminer from Alsace, so please stay tuned for that episode. I believe they're both Grand Crus that I'm going to taste. And if you like this episode, smash that like button. I would appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I thank you. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter if you want to see more daily updates on wine reviews and overall things happening in wine. Take care. Cheers.